In an industry dominated by billion-dollar giants and polished Silicon Valley branding, a bold narrative is emerging from Southern Africa. While the world watches the rise of electric freight through companies like Tesla and its highly anticipated Tesla Semi-sleeper cab concept, a different kind of ambition is quietly building momentum under the leadership of Maxwell Chikumbutso. And if the claims surrounding his electric truck are to be believed, the global trucking market may be on the verge of an unexpected shakeup. Picture this: long-haul truck drivers crossing vast highways without worrying about diesel costs, battery anxiety, or overnight charging delays. Imagine fleets operating with reduced operational expenses in regions where infrastructure gaps have traditionally slowed electrification. This is the vision being projected, not from California, but from Zimbabwe. For years, Tesla Semi has represented the gold standard of electric heavy transport. With its aerodynamic design, advanced driver interface, and projected long-range battery capabilities, it promised to redefine freight efficiency. The sleeper cab version in particular aimed to target long-distance logistics, the backbone of global trade. It wasn't just a truck, it was positioned as the future of sustainable cargo transport. But disruption rarely sends a calendar invite. Maxwell Chikumbutso has built his public reputation around ambitious energy concepts and bold technological prototypes. His electric truck narrative centers on independence, reduced reliance on conventional charging infrastructure, and potentially revolutionary onboard power systems. While detailed technical validations remain limited in the public domain, the strategic positioning of his project speaks volumes. It is framed not merely as a competitor to Tesla's sleeper cab, but as an alternative philosophy of electrification. The key difference lies in narrative positioning. Tesla Semi depends on high-capacity lithium-ion battery packs and a growing network of megachargers. Its strength is ecosystem integration: vehicles, software, energy storage, and charging infrastructure working in harmony. The approach is centralized, structured, and data-driven. Chikumbutso's concept, by contrast, is often presented as decentralized and self-reliant. Supporters describe it as designed for markets where charging networks are scarce or unreliable. If proven scalable, that distinction alone would represent a powerful shift in emerging economies across Africa, Asia, and parts of Latin America, regions where logistics growth is accelerating but infrastructure remains uneven. The global freight market is enormous. Trillions of dollars move annually across continents. Diesel still dominates heavy transport, contributing significantly to carbon emissions and fuel import costs in developing nations. The first company to truly crack affordable, scalable electric long-haul trucking for underserved markets doesn't just gain market share, it reshapes economic leverage. And this is where the disruption narrative intensifies. Tesla's advantage lies in brand credibility, manufacturing scale, and regulatory familiarity. The Tesla Semi has undergone real-world testing with major corporations, integrating into fleet trials and commercial supply chains. Data transparency and engineering documentation provide confidence to investors and logistics companies alike. Meanwhile, Chikumbutso's project operates in a different ecosystem. It captures attention through bold demonstrations, ambitious claims, and a strong emphasis on African technological sovereignty. The symbolism is powerful: a locally developed electric truck challenging Western dominance in a sector historically controlled by multinational corporations. If such a vehicle were to achieve competitive range, durability, and cost efficiency, especially without requiring massive charging infrastructure investment, the implications would extend beyond trucking. It would challenge assumptions about where high-impact innovation must originate. Consider the geopolitical dimension. Energy independence has always influenced global power structures. Electric vehicles shift dependence from oil supply chains to mineral supply chains: lithium, cobalt, nickel. Africa already holds significant reserves of critical minerals. A successful African-developed electric freight platform could theoretically integrate local resource processing, manufacturing, and deployment in a vertically aligned strategy. That scenario would not simply compete with Tesla's sleeper cab. It would reframe the supply chain conversation entirely. Yet disruption is never purely technical. It is psychological. Markets move on confidence as much as capability. Tesla commands trust built over years of delivering consumer EVs, scaling factories, and meeting regulatory standards in multiple countries. For Chikumbutso's electric truck to meaningfully disrupt, it must transition from visionary prototype to verifiable industrial product. And this is where the story becomes more layered. Emerging markets often prioritize affordability and resilience over cutting-edge luxury. If an electric truck were engineered specifically for rougher road conditions, lower maintenance complexity, and energy flexibility, it could find traction in regions underserved by premium Western EV pricing structures. Imagine fleet operators in landlocked African nations adopting electric freight not because it is trendy, but because it lowers operational costs and reduces dependence on volatile diesel imports. Imagine cross-border transport corridors electrifying without waiting for multinational infrastructure rollouts. Imagine governments aligning procurement strategies with domestic technological champions rather than foreign manufacturers. The ripple effects could alter trade balances. Tesla's sleeper cab is optimized for highly structured logistics networks, interstate highways, predictable charging intervals, and centralized fleet management systems. That model thrives in North America and parts of Europe. But disruption often begins at the margins. If Maxwell Chikumbutso's electric truck secures early adoption in regions where Tesla has limited operational footprint, it could carve out a parallel growth trajectory. Market dominance does not always require beating a giant on its strongest battlefield. Sometimes it requires choosing a different battlefield altogether. And as whispers grow around pilot deployments, demonstration units, and potential partnerships, speculation intensifies about scalability. Can manufacturing capacity expand? Can international certification standards be met? Can performance claims withstand third-party scrutiny? These questions do not weaken the disruption narrative. They amplify it. Because the moment independent verification confirms competitive performance metrics, the global conversation shifts from skepticism to serious evaluation. Investors look twice. Policymakers reconsider procurement pipelines. Competitors recalibrate regional strategies. Meanwhile, the broader electric trucking industry accelerates. Traditional diesel manufacturers are racing to electrify their heavy-duty fleets. Chinese EV truck makers are expanding aggressively into developing markets. European firms are investing billions in hydrogen and battery electric freight platforms. The competition landscape is no longer binary. It is multipolar. And in that multipolar landscape, visibility matters as much as horsepower. Chikumbutso's positioning taps into something larger than freight transport. It taps into aspiration. It tells a story of technological leapfrogging, of emerging economies bypassing incremental evolution and moving straight into advanced electrification without replicating decades of fossil fuel dependency. If successful, the truck would symbolize not just mechanical capability, but economic agency. Now imagine a future logistics corridor stretching from southern Africa through Central Africa, powered primarily by electric heavy-duty trucks designed and manufactured within the continent. Imagine reduced fuel import bills redirecting capital into local infrastructure. Imagine regional trade strengthening through lower freight costs and cleaner energy models. The disruption narrative becomes systemic. But competition with Tesla's sleeper cab remains central to the storyline because Tesla represents the benchmark of modern EV credibility. Every comparison draws attention. Every claimed advantage sparks debate. Every demonstration fuels viral discussions online. And as both projects evolve, the global freight industry watches carefully, not just for performance numbers, but for proof of scalability. Because in heavy transport, promises must eventually meet payload realities. Range must survive real cargo weight. Efficiency must endure real road gradients. Durability must withstand real weather extremes. If Maxwell Chikumbutso's electric truck continues progressing from concept to verified fleet integration, the competitive tension will intensify. Tesla may accelerate emerging market strategies. Partnerships could shift. Infrastructure investment models might diversify. And quietly, behind factory doors and test tracks, engineers on both sides will be refining battery chemistry, optimizing motor efficiency, and calculating thermal management tolerances, knowing that the race is not only about range or torque, but about narrative control in a trillion-dollar industry. Because once disruption gains credibility, it does not politely request market share. It takes it. And somewhere between prototype demonstrations and industrial production lines, between skepticism and validation, between regional ambition and global competition, this electric truck story continues unfolding, with logistics companies running cost simulations, policymakers evaluating incentives, and competitors monitoring every public update, while the road ahead stretches long, open, and electrically charged. And the next phase of this contest is already beginning to take shape as new test data emerges, new manufacturing partnerships are rumored, and freight operators begin asking a single, decisive question that could redefine the future of heavy transport. Because once fleet operators start asking that question, the competitive landscape shifts from brand loyalty to operational math. Freight companies live and die by margins. Every kilometer traveled is calculated against fuel cost, maintenance cycles, downtime risk, and payload efficiency. Diesel volatility has long been a hidden tax on developing economies, where fuel imports strain national budgets and exchange reserves. Electrification promises relief, but only if it solves the infrastructure equation. Tesla's strategy, with the Tesla Semi-Sleeper Cab, is built around ecosystem expansion. Massive battery packs, megawatt charging corridors, centralized fleet analytics. It's a vertically integrated architecture designed to dominate structured markets. And in those environments, that strategy is powerful. But Maxwell Chikumbutso's narrative suggests a different calculus, one that challenges the assumption that electrification must follow the same infrastructure-heavy model everywhere. If his electric truck can meaningfully reduce reliance on high-capacity charging stations, the implications ripple far beyond one product comparison. Imagine logistics operators in regions where power grids are inconsistent. Installing megachargers across thousands of kilometers is capital-intensive and time-consuming. Governments must coordinate permits, grid upgrades, land allocation. It's a multi-year process. Now imagine an alternative where trucks are engineered to operate with greater onboard energy autonomy or flexible charging models tailored for decentralized power systems. That possibility alone introduces strategic optionality. Optionality is disruptive. Because when fleet owners have options, they negotiate differently. They invest differently. They diversify suppliers. And as whispers circulate about field tests, about endurance runs under heavy loads, about attempts to validate real-world range under African road conditions, industry analysts begin watching more closely. Heavy-duty trucking is unforgiving. Claims collapse quickly under scrutiny. But if performance data withstands stress tests, if torque curves align with hauling demands, if battery thermal systems remain stable in extreme heat, confidence compounds rapidly. Tesla earned credibility through iterative delivery. The Model S proved luxury EV viability. The Model 3 scaled mass adoption. The Semi is positioned as the industrial culmination of that journey. That track record matters. For Chikumbutso's truck to disrupt, it must establish its own credibility arc, step by verified step. Yet disruption sometimes thrives precisely because expectations are lower at the outset. There is room to surprise, room to exceed skepticism. Consider the psychological shift if independent third-party engineers publish validated performance metrics confirming competitive range and efficiency. The narrative would transform overnight. Headlines would pivot from curiosity to competition. Investors searching for high-growth frontier markets would begin running new projections. And global OEMs, established diesel manufacturers transitioning to electric, would take notice. Because disruption is rarely about beating a leader on day one. It's about identifying a vulnerability. Tesla's vulnerability is not engineering, it's geographic concentration. Its early freight deployments focus heavily on North America. Infrastructure rollouts mirror that priority. If emerging markets electrify through alternative pathways first, Tesla could find itself adapting to frameworks it did not design. That's where the real chess match begins. Governments across Africa are exploring industrialization strategies. Domestic manufacturing reduces import dependence. It creates jobs. It stimulates supply chains. If an electric truck platform is positioned not only as a vehicle, but as a catalyst for local production ecosystems, battery assembly, motor manufacturing, component fabrication, it aligns with national development agendas. Suddenly, procurement decisions are not just commercial. They are strategic. Meanwhile, global sustainability pressures intensify. Multinational corporations commit to carbon-neutral supply chains. Freight emissions fall under scrutiny. Companies operating in emerging markets face pressure to decarbonize without dramatically increasing costs. If Chikumbutso's electric truck can demonstrate lower total cost of ownership in such regions, it becomes attractive not merely as a symbolic challenger to Tesla, but as a practical compliance tool for corporations seeking ESG alignment. And as those corporate evaluations unfold, the competitive dialogue grows sharper. Tesla's sleeper cab emphasizes driver comfort, digital integration, advanced autopilot features, and optimized aerodynamics for long-haul highways. It is engineered for predictable, high-speed corridors. But many freight routes in developing economies involve mixed terrain, uneven surfaces, and variable grid access. Engineering for resilience rather than perfection becomes critical. Suspension durability, simplified maintenance systems, accessible repair networks. These details determine adoption far more than touchscreen elegance. If Chikumbutso's team has prioritized rugged adaptability, it may find traction where highly optimized but infrastructure-dependent systems struggle. The industry watches. Battery chemistry becomes central to the narrative. Energy density determines range. Thermal management determines longevity. Charging architecture determines downtime. If alternative battery approaches are being explored, whether through hybridized systems or unconventional energy integration, verification will be the turning point. Because once performance enters the realm of measurable reality, market speculation turns into procurement planning. And then there's pricing. Tesla's scale allows for aggressive cost management over time, but initial deployments of the Semi remain premium investments. For many logistics operators in developing economies, capital expenditure barriers slow adoption even if long-term savings are attractive. If Chikumbutso's electric truck undercuts pricing while maintaining competitive performance, disruption accelerates dramatically. Early adopters gain cost advantage. Competitors feel pressure. Market segmentation shifts. But scale remains the ultimate hurdle. Manufacturing heavy-duty electric trucks requires supply chain precision. Motors, inverters, battery cells, chassis fabrication. Each component must meet industrial tolerances at volume. Transitioning from prototype to mass production is the crucible where many ambitious projects falter. The next phase of this unfolding story will hinge on production capacity, partnerships with component suppliers, certification milestones, fleet trials under commercial contracts rather than demonstration showcases. And as those milestones approach, speculation intensifies across digital forums and industry conferences. Is this the beginning of a parallel EV freight ecosystem? Will Tesla accelerate emerging market expansion in response? Could joint ventures redefine competition altogether? Because in industries measured in decades, even small early shifts compound into massive long-term consequences. The heavy transport revolution is not just about replacing diesel engines with electric motors. It is about redefining who controls the technological narrative, who builds the infrastructure, who captures the value chain. And as Maxwell Chikumbutso continues advancing his electric truck vision, refining prototypes, engaging stakeholders, navigating skepticism, the disruption storyline deepens, not because it has already conquered Tesla's sleeper cab market, but because it has forced the market to imagine alternatives. Alternatives create leverage. Leverage reshapes industries. And somewhere right now, behind closed factory doors and open proving grounds, engineers are recalibrating software algorithms, stress-testing battery modules under simulated long-haul cycles, analyzing regenerative braking efficiency under full cargo weight, while logistics executives quietly compare spreadsheets and policymakers assess industrial incentives. All while the electric freight corridor of the future begins to split into multiple possible pathways, each leading toward a different configuration of power, production, and influence, and the next decisive development is already forming in the background, gathering momentum, preparing to surface, ready to redefine not just a truck comparison, but the very structure of global heavy transport competition. Inside boardrooms across freight conglomerates, discussions are no longer theoretical. Risk analysts are modeling side-by-side adoption scenarios. What happens if Tesla's infrastructure rollout accelerates faster than projected? What happens if Maxwell Chikumbutso's platform demonstrates viable autonomy from large-scale charging dependency? Which model reduces exposure to energy price fluctuations? Which aligns with regional policy incentives? These are not emotional questions. They are capital allocation questions. And capital always follows strategic advantage. The Tesla semi-sleeper cab was engineered with long-haul endurance in mind, extended range, driver-focused ergonomics, centralized fleet telemetry. It reflects a future where highways are electrified corridors connected by megawatt charging hubs, synchronized through data ecosystems. It's a vision built on scale and standardization. But scale can be both strength and inertia. If a disruptive alternative emerges that performs competitively without requiring the same degree of synchronized infrastructure investment, smaller nations and independent fleet operators may move faster. They won't wait for continent-wide grid overhauls. They'll adopt what works within their current constraints. And that's where momentum begins to compound quietly. Because the first successful logistics company to reduce operational costs significantly through a decentralized electric trucking model becomes a case study. That case study becomes a conference keynote. That keynote becomes a policy discussion. And policy discussions often turn into funding pipelines. Funding accelerates manufacturing. Manufacturing accelerates distribution. Distribution normalizes adoption. Meanwhile, Tesla continues refining its industrial strategy, expanding gigafactories, optimizing battery chemistry, enhancing charging throughput. The company thrives on iteration. It learns from deployment data and improves aggressively. That adaptability is formidable. But disruption does not require eliminating a giant. It requires carving out an uncontested growth curve. And if Maxwell Chikumbutso's electric truck secures even a modest but consistent foothold in underpenetrated freight markets, it establishes something powerful, proof of concept under real economic pressure. Heavy cargo doesn't care about branding. It cares about torque. It cares about durability. It cares about uptime. If early adopters report fewer mechanical breakdowns due to simplified electric drivetrains, if maintenance costs decline compared to diesel fleets, if range performance remains stable despite high ambient temperatures, confidence spreads in waves. Then suppliers begin adapting to the new demand. Local parts manufacturers retool production lines. Technical training institutes develop certification programs for electric heavy-duty maintenance. Insurance companies adjust risk models based on electric fleet data. An ecosystem begins forming organically. And once an ecosystem forms, competition transforms from product versus product into system versus system. Tesla's system is polished, integrated, global. Chikumbutso's emerging system, if it materializes at scale, would be localized, adaptive, potentially more modular. Two philosophies. Two growth trajectories. But this isn't just a commercial rivalry. It's symbolic. For decades, high-tech automotive breakthroughs have largely flowed from industrial powerhouses to developing markets. Innovation was exported. Adoption was downstream. The idea that a disruptive heavy transport platform could originate within Africa and compete on equal footing shifts perception. Perception shapes investment psychology. And investment psychology influences market destiny. Yet the road remains demanding. Regulatory approvals for heavy-duty vehicles are rigorous. Safety certifications, emissions compliance benchmarks, structural crash tests, braking standards, these are not optional. To compete globally, the truck must pass international scrutiny. Passing that scrutiny would be transformative. Because once certified for cross-border freight corridors, adoption is no longer limited to domestic routes. Regional trade blocs could integrate electric logistics at scale. Export markets could open. Strategic alliances with foreign distributors could materialize. And at that point, The narrative evolves from disrupting Tesla's sleeper cab market to redefining competitive parity. Meanwhile, battery technology continues advancing worldwide. Solid-state research intensifies. Energy density improvements shrink weight penalties. Charging speeds increase. Whoever integrates these advancements most efficiently into heavy-duty architecture will gain an edge. So behind the public narrative, engineers race against time. Thermal management systems are recalculated. Battery pack modularity is tested for rapid replacement scenarios. Aerodynamics are refined to squeeze out incremental range gains. Software teams optimize energy management algorithms that dynamically adapt to load variation and terrain incline. Every marginal improvement compounds over thousands of kilometers. And as freight corridors stretch across deserts, mountains, and industrial zones, real-world testing becomes the ultimate judge. Lab simulations are replaced by dust, vibration, unpredictable weather, and overloaded cargo pallets. If the truck performs under those conditions consistently, skepticism erodes. Then something subtle but decisive happens. Competitors begin benchmarking against it. The moment Tesla's internal analysts begin modeling responses to an emerging African electric freight competitor, the disruption has already achieved impact. Even if market shares remain unequal, the strategic equation has changed. Because now there are two centers of gravity. And when industries develop multiple centers of gravity, innovation accelerates. Fleet operators win through better pricing. Governments win through strategic leverage. Drivers win through improved vehicle ergonomics and lower noise pollution. Cities win through reduced emissions. Investors win through diversified opportunity. But none of that is guaranteed. The coming chapters depend on transparency, scalability, and sustained engineering discipline. Bold announcements must be followed by measurable deliveries. Partnerships must convert into assembly lines. Assembly lines must convert into registered vehicles hauling real freight. And somewhere in that transition from ambition to execution, the next turning point is quietly forming. Perhaps it will be a large fleet contract. Perhaps it will be an international certification milestone. Perhaps it will be a breakthrough endurance test that exceeds expectations. Whatever it is, it won't arrive with fireworks. It will arrive with data. And once the data is undeniable, the conversation will shift again, from possibility to inevitability, while freight operators around the world continue recalculating their long-term strategies. Investors scan emerging markets for scalable industrial ventures, and the electric highways of tomorrow gradually fill with vehicles that represent more than transport, vehicles that represent shifting economic gravity, technological independence, and a rebalancing of industrial influence. And as that rebalancing accelerates, the competition intensifies further. The stakes climb higher, and the silent race between infrastructure-heavy ecosystems and decentralized energy-driven platforms moves into its most decisive phase yet, with new prototypes entering testing grounds, confidential negotiations unfolding behind closed doors, and the next strategic reveal poised to push this electrified rivalry into territory no one predicted just a few years ago. The next decisive phase will not be announced in a press release. It will unfold in freight depots at dawn, where dispatch managers review route assignments and calculate whether a fully electric fleet can complete a 900-kilometer haul without compromise. It will unfold in procurement departments, where executives quietly request side-by-side performance simulations, Tesla's infrastructure-dependent model versus a potentially more autonomous alternative. And it will unfold in ministries of transport, where policymakers examine whether national electrification strategies should rely entirely on imported ecosystems or cultivate domestic innovation. Because electrifying heavy transport is not merely about swapping engines. It is about re-engineering economic flow. Every long-haul truck represents moving capital, raw materials to factories, agricultural output to ports, manufactured goods to inland markets. The cost efficiency of those movements influences food prices, construction budgets, export competitiveness, even inflation metrics. If one electric truck platform reduces operational friction in developing trade corridors by even a marginal percentage, that efficiency scales across millions of tons of cargo annually. and marginal gains at scale redefine national advantage. Meanwhile, Tesla continues expanding its charging infrastructure footprint. Megawatt charging corridors are designed to slash downtime. Fleet telemetry platforms optimize route efficiency in real time. Software updates enhance regenerative braking performance, squeezing extra kilometers from every charge cycle. It is a sophisticated ecosystem. But ecosystems require stability, consistent grid power, synchronized expansion, standardized compliance frameworks. In regions where such stability is still evolving, adaptability becomes the competitive variable. If Maxwell Chikumbutso's electric truck can demonstrate adaptability, the ability to function reliably in areas with grid variability, the capacity to integrate alternative energy inputs, the resilience to operate in extreme climates without complex support infrastructure, it becomes more than a product. It becomes a flexible solution. Flexibility attracts early adopters. Early adopters attract investors. Investors attract scaling capital. And scaling capital transforms prototypes into production runs. The transition from hand-assembled demonstration units to streamlined manufacturing lines is where most disruptive dreams either crystallize or collapse. Supply chains must lock into rhythm. Quality control must stabilize. Warranty risk must be predictable. If that transition is achieved, the competitive equation sharpens dramatically.